welcome everyone to the screening of The Story of Plastic, which illustrates in great detail the impact big plastic has on communities, individuals, and the natural environment through the life of plastic, from extraction to disposal. And I will let the movie speak for itself. My name is Mindy O'Brien. I'm the coordinator of Voice Ireland, and with Friends of the Earth, we founded the Sick of Plastic campaign back in Ireland in 2018, and are members of the Break Free from Plastic movement. But before I go any further, I'd like to go through some housekeeping. First of all, we'll be sharing a few polls with you during tonight's panel discussion, and you've already done the first one. We'll do another one at the end of my introduction. And also, if you have any questions for the panelists, please type them in the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Also, we would love to hear more about you, so please share your name and location and what you're passionate about in the chat box so you can say hello to other people listening in tonight. You might have some friends who are listening in as well. Now, back to the movie. I want to congratulate the Story of Stuff, an organization who made this insightful movie, and the Break Free from Plastic movement, who has been pushing for the fast-moving consumer goods companies to change their practices and policymakers to adopt ambitious legislation to turn off the tap on plastic. They've also highlighted the link between petrochemical companies and plastic, their power, and how to combat them. We have been working hard in Ireland to achieve effective national legislation to reduce single-use plastic, adopt a deposit refund scheme for drinks containers, facilitate and promote reuse solutions, and to push forward the circular economy as a new business and societal model. And we ask you to join us in our efforts and to sign up to our Sick of Plastic campaign and to either join an existing Sick of Plastic group or start your own Unchange X. Now, enough of me, and I would like to introduce our moderator tonight, is Aoibhéann McCann, who has kindly offered to help us this evening. Thank you, Aoibhéann. She is a theater, film, and television actor with roles in hit shows such as Vikings and Can't Cope, Won't Cope. She recently won an Irish Times Theatre Awards for Best Actress in the Lyric Theatre production, A Streetcar Named Desire. She's also a sustainability activist and campaigner with a particular interest in environment of impacts of fast fashion. And we are thrilled that she is here with us today. So thank you, Aoibhéann, and it's over to you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, everybody. So just to bear in mind, it's still technology we're dealing with this evening. So if things go wrong, bear with us. It's very unlikely to happen that way, but we'll try our very best. I don't want to spend too much time talking, so I'm going to introduce the panelists just now. We've got, if you want to wave, everyone, as I say your name. We've got Andy Gheorghiu, Fracking Policy Advisor, Food and Water Europe. We've got Dr. Niall O'Leary, School of Microbiology, UCC. Dr. Anna Watson, Head of Advocacy at CHEM Trust, and we have Meaghan Carmody, Head of Movement Building, Friends of the Earth, and we have Sorcha Kavanagh, Coordinator of Conscious Cup Campaign, and of course, Angela Kenny from Sick of Plastic. We're going to begin some introductions, much more comprehensive ones from each person. So first of all, Andy, fire ahead and tell us what you're about. That's very casually. Go ahead, Andy. Show us what you're about. No pressure.
Okay, so first of all, I want to thank you for inviting me and for giving me the chance to give this presentation here. I bumped into the work on plastics through the work on fracking, which is also a key issue in Ireland. I did that by supporting the anti-fracking movement in the UK. And I know exactly what I'm talking about, where we have one main company that owns a majority of the shale licenses in England and Scotland, and it's a petrochemical company named Ineos. It's the largest virgin plastic producer in the UK and also in Europe. And I was intrigued to learn that they've jumped into the business of fracking in order to secure cheap raw material supply for their plastics business. And this is when I've started digging deeper, and Food and Water Watch and Food and Water Europe have published 3 issue briefs. And this is when I've also started to reach out to the Break Free from Plastic movement in order to work with them. Do you want me to start with the slides right now, or? Okay, so I prepared a few slides to give you an overview because we were asked to kind of like explain a bit the role that we're having within the Breakthrough from Plastic movement. As I've already mentioned, I came in as an outsider, and I'm working now with BFFP for over 2 years, I would say, 2.5 years. And it was important to kind of like realize that we will not be able to tackle the plastic crisis without tackling the upstream part of the plastic production. And this upstream part is directly linked to the fracking industry in the United States. And it's also directly linked to the other major overarching crisis, which is the climate crisis. And one key player that I've already mentioned is INEOS. But before I go a bit deeper into what INEOS is doing, I just want to highlight that petrochemicals as such are about to rapidly become the largest driver of global oil, and this includes the so-called wet gas or ethane consumption ahead of trucks, aviation, and shipping. This is according to a report by the International Energy Agency called The Future of Petrochemicals. And this sector alone is already the largest industrial consumer of fossil fuels, accounting as of 2018 for 14% of global oil and 8% of gas primary demand. And it's important to raise awareness about this because the whole developments within the petrochemical industry, including the plastic industry, is not really part of the climate debate. And we need to make it part of the climate debate because it's completely under the radar, but it has a major role in it. So the EIA expected in late 2018 that the cheap frack gas, which is ethane consumption, will grow by 70% until 2030, and that's in part due to the expansion of US exports to Europe. I say expected because due to COVID-19, we don't really know how this will unfold within the next few months, but this is kind of like the scenario that we're in. And I also want to refer to a very important report published by CL last year, where for the first time they've tried to assess the full life cycle impact of plastic production, starting from the extraction of fossil fuels. And according to their numbers, which are pretty conservative, the full life cycle emissions of plastic production could generate 56 gigatons of CO2 emissions by 2050. And this is as much as 10 to 13% of our entire remaining carbon budget for a 1.5 global warming scenario. So again, these two major crises, plastic pollution, climate crisis, they're directly linked to one another. And it's important to raise this issue and also to bring these two movements together, the anti-fracking and anti-gas, and also the anti-plastic movement. I want now to just show you what INEOS is in actual fact doing. By 2016, they've started establishing a transatlantic supply chain of frack gas that is coming from Pennsylvania. And they've commissioned 8 ships that are now on a regular basis transporting frack gas from the United States, either from Pennsylvania, which is here, the Marcus Hook facility, or if they're not able to transport it from here, from Houston, which is the largest petrochemical cluster in the world, to their plastic facilities at Grangemouth in Scotland or Roughness in Norway. And they have plans to expand this and to invest into new facilities based on frack gas from the US at Antwerp in Belgium. And they also have plans to use Antwerp as a hub for storage hub for frack gas. And they've commissioned extra ships that will then further transport the hydrocarbons from Antwerp to their other petrochemical facilities at Cologne. And what this actually means, this fracking for plastics business of INEOS, this we only realize when we look into how the construction of a pipeline that INEOS needs to really get the frack gas from the fracking fields to the export terminal at Marcus Hook. When we look into what happened and what happens during the construction of this pipeline. Sunoco is the main partner of INEOS, And they've been fined in 2018, $12.6 million. This is one of the largest fines ever ordered in the US by the Department of the Environment in Pennsylvania because of ongoing violations.
Sorry, Andy, 30 seconds.
Yeah. Okay, because of ongoing violations during the construction. And now I have to rush a bit through my slide because I realize I don't have enough time. INEOS has plans to frack in the US as well. One interesting part that is directly linked to Ireland and also the anti-LNG campaign is that New Fortress Energy, who owns the Shannon LNG project, has now teamed up with INEOS, and INEOS is now in actual fact supplying the floating storage unit of New Fortress Energy in Jamaica with frack gas from the United States. So this is something that is really important for the Irish anti-fracking, anti-LNG, but also anti-plastic movement to keep in mind. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andy. Sorry to rush you there.
No worries.
I promise. And now we have Dr. Niall O'Leary up next to impart his wisdom.
And thank you again, as Andy said, thanks very much for the invitation and the opportunity to contribute. I hope you can hear me. Yeah, okay, great. And I'm going to, I suppose, briefly just introduce myself for why I'm interested in this or involved in this area. As a microbiologist rather than a chemist, I suppose, what's the relevance? My PhD work many years ago, I won't say how many, focused on styrene degradation and the ability of bacteria to do that kind of thing. And bacteria are our natural cleaners of the planet, and fungi, if you like, and are seen as a biotechnological opportunity maybe to get involved in plastic polymer cleanup. And I'll talk about that a little bit as I go on. So from there, I moved into areas of wastewater and away from pollutant degradation into the ability of bacteria to actually store polymers within their cells. And some of those polymers behave very much like plastics that we have, but because they're produced by natural systems, they can be degraded in natural environments. So the video talked a little bit about biopolymers, and I'm going to comment on that to try and provide maybe a bit more balanced arguments in relation to that topic as well. So given that time is tight, I'm just going to jump into the slides here straight away and try and share my screen with you. So I'll start at the other end maybe. Okay, hopefully you can see the first slide there by petrochemical. Great, okay, thank you. So just some of the challenges and myths, I suppose, the case has been made very clearly, I suppose, about plastic accumulation in the environment in the video. And this slide just shows the kind of, how different types of plastics that dominate our current consumption when they emerged. And this line indicates their rapid growth and that it's continuing now. But in the background, scientists have been observing, I suppose, or it's been science's role to observe the impacts of this. So we've gone from invention and development, which continues on now, into product diversification, and then starting to see the accumulation in natural habitats. So what I just wanted to summarize for some people maybe was the kind of key points and where we are, or where the research community is now looking in relation to plastics and the microplastics and nanoplastics scale. And it brought up a point in the video about visibility. One of the commentators talked about it, how visible it was now, but actually our concern is that we're moving away from visibility to invisibility again. So plastic use and accumulation and the impacts on wildlife in the 1960s began to be seen, I suppose, in island environments with bird species that were being affected and were feeding on different materials and altering their survival patterns. And then plastic debris showing up in the 70s. Actually, as this moved on, some legislation started to emerge, but the research community seemed to lose focus in this area in the 1990s until the garbage patches began to appear or be commentated on in the 2000s. And since then, we've moved on very quickly into categorizing where plastics are. These are two seminal reports by the GSAMP group, this group of experts on the scientific aspects of marine environmental protection. And these two reports essentially went down and documented marine environments, the creatures living in them, and the prevalence of microplastics among them. And it's quite stark reading just how widespread these materials are in our environment. and in the fauna in them. What we're beginning to see now in microplastics is their accumulation and trophic transfer up through food webs, and there was comments on this in the documentary. And this is a serious problem because it's, you know, some of these creatures form the real basis of the food web and make their way to us also. Greenhouse gas emissions have begun to emerge, airborne microplastics, but this area is probably of most concern at the moment. And I know Anna Watson may comment on this in relation to health, so I don't want to say too much, but nanoplastics, we begin to lose visibility of plastics when they get to this scale because it requires really complex chemistry to be able to monitor them and track them, and they really aren't visible. And nanomaterials behave differently to the large macro scale material. They take on different chemical reactivity. And these are small enough to interact with the bacteria in your gut even. And there are a lot of studies coming out showing at this level across a range of organisms that what is the normal role of your bacteria in your gut, and I suppose I'm just taking a microbiology focus, others may take a different focus, that those bacteria secrete metabolites that control a lot of things in your body. And when you introduce pollutants, you can change the chemical signaling and start to move towards poor health outcomes. The problem is we're in a kind of a black box in relation to this and really playing catch up in relation to the health impacts. But I don't imagine the picture is going to improve any from what was presented in the documentary in relation to this. The other side from a researcher's point of view is where does money come in for research? And if you look at European funding over the last number of years, so for anybody not involved in research, if you want to secure funding, there are normally tranches of money that are put aside by Europe. And these were called the framework programs. So they're large volumes of money, huge sums now, up in the billions, and you would go in with partners to try and get access to these funds. So what this table just shows is the amount of money that was given over to producing new plastics. So these large blue sections here are new plastics being made, okay? And then this is money in grey being spent on investigating biodegradation. So very small amounts of the funding pot were given to this, but they began to increase slightly. BioClean was a project that was given 3 million to try and find a biotechnological solution to plastic. And what that was 18 partners across a range of European countries and one Chinese collaborator who targeted the common plastics of our day. And they took bacteria from every environment they could, potentially a huge collection of microbes, fungi, etc. They screened them for their ability to interact with these polymers and degrade them. And out of all those hundreds of thousands, they got down to 65, which really had a limited capacity to have any impact on these materials. And those were under ideal conditions. So the point I suppose I'm trying to make is that these materials are not going to degrade in our environment anytime soon. And also the capacity for biotechnology to produce enzymes and systems to degrade these, even though Europe is pushing money in this direction, really is a long game. So it's anyone waiting for a sort of short-term biotechnological solution is going to be waiting quite some time in relation to degradation. The other point made in the movie was about biopolymers and the idea that we're almost ready to go in relation to delivering these. There's a caveat emptor here though, in that many of the classified as bioplastics, these fall into this category here, which are biodegradable, but they are, these are biodegradable ones here, I apologize. These are bio-based, but non-biodegradable. So the argument being made in the study about bio-PET coming from corn, but being just as polluting, that's what's reflected largely in the industry at present.
Sorry, Niall, that's 7 minutes.
Oh, sorry, so it's my last point actually. So the bioplastics industry, to be fair, only occupies 1% of the global market and is not ready. If the plastics industry turned around tomorrow and said, okay, we'll switch over to biopolymers, we are not ready to do that in any meaningful shape. So there's going to be a lag, and really the responsibility falls back to consumers to perform the most immediate intervention in this issue.
Thank you so much. Sorry for rushing you there.
No, perfect, thank you.
We're going to move on now to Dr. Anna Watson. Thanks, Anna.
Oh, sorry, I have to stop sharing, apologies.
And Anna, you're muted at the moment.
Okay, that's lovely. Hi, hello everybody. It's great to be part of this panel this evening. So I am just going to start sharing my screen as well. Again, let's hope that everything goes smoothly with this. I am just going to give you a brief overview on the issue of plastics, chemicals and health. I work for a small NGO. We're called CHEM Trust. We are a charity and we work at the UK, the EU and the global level to protect humans and wildlife from harmful chemicals. We're based in the UK, also in Denmark and Germany and Brussels. And we work with scientists and decision makers on this issue of hazardous chemicals, and we work very closely with other civil society groups. And one of those civil society movements is a Break Free from Plastic movement, which were the people behind the film that you have all watched. This is going to be quite a fast overview of some of the issues to do with plastics and health, but you can find out more information about many of the things that I'm going to touch on our website. So chemicals, they're not only the main ingredients of plastics, they're also the additives that go in. So if you look at the picture here, that water bottle, it's got colour, so chemicals are used to colour that water bottle. Chemicals are added to plastics to make them soft. They're added to make them less flammable. So, you know, you'll be joining this evening on your phone or your laptop or desktop. That's got chemicals to stop, you know, obviously those things sort of, you know, being more resistant to fire. The other aspect about chemicals and plastics is there are impurities. So the chemical impurities get into plastics through the manufacture and also through the degradation. And some of those substances have not yet been identified. And because they're not identified, we therefore have no data on the impact that they have on people or wildlife. As you saw in the film, and I know most of you have watched it, you know, plastic packaging is a massive environmental problem. But, and Niall has touched on this, there's the invisible pollutants as well. So the chemicals in the plastic packaging are also a problem. We're exposed to those when they migrate into the food and the drink we're taking in. And that happens all the way from the manufacturing, the use, the disposal, and the recycling. So over the last couple of years, ChemTrust has been involved in a project with other civil society organisations and also academic scientists, both based in the US and also in Sweden. And we wanted to look at what are the hazardous chemicals that are being used in plastic packaging. Now, this is all plastic packaging, but obviously huge amounts of plastic packaging are used for food and drink. We realised that actually there was no one place that we could find where all of the chemicals, a list of all the chemicals that are used in plastic packaging. So we had to create a database. And by putting that database together, we found out that there's over 4,000 chemicals either used in the manufacture of the plastic packaging or in the plastic packaging itself in the final product. And of those chemicals, at least 148 were identified as particularly hazardous. So particularly hazardous either to human health or the environment or to both. And because some of those chemicals in the 4,000 didn't have any data at all, no data on toxicity. So that 148 is a very conservative estimate of the number of chemicals that were hazardous. 35 of those chemicals were particularly concerning because they are known endocrine disruptors. Now, endocrine disruptors chemicals interfere with our very sensitive hormone system. That's the system that controls our metabolism, our growth, and our development. And the groups of those, and I'm sorry to have to put sort of names here that might not be familiar to people, but groups of chemicals that are particularly concerning that are endocrine disruptors are the bisphenols, the phthalates, and the PFAS chemicals. And even though these may be present in very small amounts in the plastic packaging, they may be migrating out of the plastic packaging into our food and drink in very small amounts. Unfortunately, these chemicals have an impact, they, you know, at a very low dose. And also we're exposed to mixtures of these chemicals from many different sources in our daily life. These are in everyday products. So if we take an example of, there's an infographic here showing the sorts of chemicals that have an impact on brain development, particularly at a very, very vulnerable time, which is when the fetus is developing and the brain is developing the fetus. You've got chemicals having an impact on the developing brain that are coming from our food packaging, from our electronic screens, from the furniture in our house, from till receipts that you're picking up when you're going shopping, from pesticides on our food, from clothing, and from cookware. And they are all working together, unfortunately, to impact on our health. And that's just thinking about the chemicals that have an impact on brain development. The other health impacts that link to endocrine disrupting chemicals, and there are fertility problems, there are hormone-related cancers, and there's obesity and diabetes. So it's absolutely imperative, both for human health and also for protection of wildlife, that we get these most hazardous chemicals out of plastics and other products. And this is also really important in the context of the circular economy. We know, and you've seen that in the film, that, you know, recycling is not the final solution, but it is part of the solution. And you can't have a clean circular economy when you have hazardous chemicals cycling through that again and again. And you can end up with unintended consequences. You can end up with chemicals in products that shouldn't be there. So when black plastic electronic waste is recycled into other products, such as plastic utensils or children's toys, those products end up with flame retardants in, and those flame retardants should not be in those products, and therefore we get exposed to them in a way that shouldn't be happening. So just to conclude on this, we need far more information about what chemicals are used in plastics, and we definitely need to know what their toxicity is. There's a real lack of transparency. It's very hard for scientists and for civil society groups to get hold of that information. We absolutely need restrictions on the use of the most hazardous chemicals in plastics, especially in our food packaging. Those chemicals, we know they migrate into the food, so we need to be increasing the use of inert packaging, and also obviously environmentally we also need to be using inert reusable packaging, especially for food packaging and for storage. And the wonderful opportunity that we have over the next few years is that there is going to be revision of EU legislation on food contact materials, so that is food packaging. So we're going to be able to make sure, hopefully, by working together as a movement, to make sure that basically the materials that come into contact with our food are free from hazardous chemicals, to protect both human health but also the environment.
Thank you, Anna. That was really great. Just to remind everyone watching that the best way to ask questions that will hopefully be answered in some shape or form later is in the Q&A tab. So just to remind you that that's the best place to go to. Okay, and up next we have Meaghan. So fire away, Meaghan.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
Great. So I'm going to break ranks here. I'm not going to do slides. I'm just going to try and tell you a bit about the type of work that we do in Friends of the Earth that relates both to plastics and to climate change. So I'm going to build heavily on what Andy finished on.
Okay.
And I guess my story around all this started a few years ago. I worked in an organisation that used an excessive amount of bubble wrap on everything. And it kind of disgusted me. So I decided to go and do a little research project and figured out that, wow, plastics actually comes from fossil fuels. And it really surprised me and actually had an impact on our practices there, as not many people realised that that's actually where a lot of plastics comes from. And then a couple of years ago, I was also heavily involved in the Sick of Plastic Shop and Drop campaign that Friends of the Earth and Voice Ireland ran as part of the Sick of Plastic campaign. So that was again trying to challenge part of this model, but really at the demand end. So getting people to go into their supermarket to say, no, I don't want this excessive plastic, take it back, yeah, not for me. So there are two kind of leverage points that we can look at, and I'm going to try and talk to you a little bit today about another one that we can look at that really was highlighted very strongly in the film, and that's looking at source, at where this feedstock for plastics comes from, what companies are producing it, and where it's being pushed in the world. So in this short 7 minutes, I'm going to tell you a little bit about gas as a fossil fuel, why it's so bad, make that link between the gas and the plastics industry, tell you a little bit about fracking, what that is and why it's so harmful. You'll know what LNG stands for, and you know how Ireland is complicit in offshoring injustices to the United States. And you'll also know how Cher, the Pope and the Hulk are also implicated in this. So natural gas, which is lauded as a transition fuel, is actually a climate bomb. It's about 100 times more potent as a greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. And this is really recent research. And it really shows that we have to be targeting gas when we're trying to target climate change, and we're trying to reduce the impact of the planet. So the Earth's climate system basically, because of that, responds a lot more quickly to gas, in particular to the main component in gas, which is called methane, way more quickly than it does to carbon dioxide, which gives us an opportunity to tackle climate change by tackling gas. Bringing more gas on stream at this critical moment is just absolutely ludicrous. But yeah, governments around the world, including Ireland's, are doing it. And the United Nations, if most of you will know, this IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change 2018 report, they said that if we are to stay within the safe threshold of warming, we can't be bringing any more gas on stream. We can't be increasing methane emissions. If we do that, we'll overshoot the 2 degrees mark within 20 to 30 years. So in a nutshell, gas is bad for the climate. So what's less well known about gas is that it contains, as well as methane, ethane, which is wet gas that Andy mentioned. And this is the main ingredient used for making petrochemicals of plastic. So if you imagine a fossil fuel plant and extracting gas, extracting oil, a lot of this material that they take out of the earth is then used to be put into plastics. So all of these companies you might have heard of, Shell, Exxon, ConocoPhillips, Dow, DuPont, all of those fossil fuel companies are also involved in producing plastics. It's a huge market for them, and they're actually getting more and more invested in plastics as they realize that their time for producing fossil fuels is running out pretty fast. Having markets for plastics gives them a safe bet for the future. So they're really increasing the amount that they produce and the amount that they sell to companies like INEOS, which Andy also mentioned. And this gas I'm speaking about, it's accessed via an unconventional form of exploration called hydraulic fracturing, or more commonly known as fracking. You might have heard of this in Ireland because we banned fracking in 2017. It was a really great campaign, lots of community groups working together, such as Love Leitrim, also working with Friends of the Earth to campaign to stop fracking in the island of Ireland. In the Republic of Ireland, it's banned, not yet in Northern Ireland. So that was a huge success. But now Ireland wants to import fracked gas from the US. So gas is bad, we don't want it, we're going to ban fracking, but it's okay, we're just going to import it. So that's what we're doing. We're planning on importing LNG, which stands for liquefied natural gas, which is gas turned into liquid, unsurprisingly. And we're planning on building import terminals for this, one in Shannon and one in Cork. These plants are planned by two companies called Next Decade and New Fortress, and they're really pushing very, very strongly for these to be built. And they are lobbying at the level of the EU, they're lobbying at the level of the Irish government. So there's been huge campaigns in Ireland against this, and I mentioned Cher earlier, so if you look up Cher Shannon LNG, you'll see her tweet which says that She's completely against CHEM LNG because of the impacts that hydraulic fracturing and oil exploration has on all of sea life. So it's just an interesting point around shared support for the anti-CHEM LNG campaign. But Ireland is still planning on this, but we have a really strong opportunity now over the next couple of weeks while the Irish programme for government is being deliberated upon. The two main parties, Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil, who are trying to form a government, have said that they might prevent CHEM LNG from being built. So we really need to hold them to that. So I know everybody who's on this call cares about plastic. And if you care about plastic, you'll very likely also care about gas and about stopping climate change. And now is a really good opportunity to contact your TDs and tell them you don't want this. So what they can do in particular is take CHEM LNG off what's called the PCI list at the European level. And that's the Project of Common Interest. And CHEM LNG is lauded as a project that's in the interest of all of the EU citizens. And for that reason, it gets a whole lot of money through what's called the Connecting Europe facility. Ireland can tell them that we don't want this. So we need to keep telling our elected officials that we don't want this. You can also join Campaign Group. It's an amazing group called Not Here, Not Anywhere, and it's rooted in solidarity. If we're not fracking here, don't push it elsewhere. And they're always looking for new members, so just look them up. And we have an action on our website in Friends of the Earth that you can take to email your TDs and tell them you don't want fracking here, you don't want fracked gas, you don't want fracking in Northern Ireland, you don't want any fracking, basically. So go onto our website, take that action. And in the next few weeks, we'll also have an opportunity for you to be able to shape that PCI process, which will be changed over the next couple of years. And it's looking likely that it will be changed in the favour of no more gas, because lots of research is coming out now to say that we don't need it. Renewables are the way to go. And I'd mentioned the Hulk. So if you look up Mark Ruffalo and Shannon LNG, he is a massive advocate for stopping new gas projects, particularly because he has a huge vested interest in stopping fracking in the US, and he's a huge activist over there. So look up Share Shannon LNG, the Hulk, or Mark Ruffalo Shannon LNG for a bit of light entertainment, and go take those actions.
Cool, thanks Meaghan. Up next we have Sorcha, and Sorcha is going to talk to us about the Conscious Cup campaign and maybe some other things. Thanks, Sorcha.
No worries. Now I just share this. Hi everybody. I'm absolutely delighted to be here discussing this evening, and it's great to see loads of names that I recognise who are attending, so hi to everybody. A lot of you will obviously know me, and for those that don't, I work on the Conscious Cup campaign for the last 3 years, coordinating it, and the aim really is to reduce single use, not just with cups, but ultimately with lots of other products that we use on a day-to-day basis. I've been working with consumers, the food to go industry, government bodies, universities, community groups, everybody basically, because it's really the responsibility of all of us to work together. And the strength and community in Ireland has been just absolutely wonderful in creating change. Very, very supportive. And just flick through to the next one. So I was going to actually talk about the Single-Use Plastics Directive, and it's very relevant really to what we're doing, what we're talking about this evening. So the EU Single-Use Plastics Directive was brought about because of the marine litter that we had a huge issue with, and it addresses the items that are the most popular that turn up on our beaches. So from mid-2021, there will actually be a considerable amount of items that will be banned by this directive. Ireland is currently transposing this into our own legal system. So it's being worked on, and it won't be slowed, which is great to hear. So as you can see there, from mid-2021, plastic cutlery, plates, beverage stirrers, straws, they will actually be banned from July next year. So anybody who's still buying them really needs to start reducing their purchasing and diminishing their stocks. And I'm talking about industry really when I say that they need to reduce their purchasing and plan. Expanded polystyrene cups and containers would be completely banned, which is wonderful because they do have carcinogenic issues attached to them, and oxo-degradable plastics will also be banned. Then moving on, the next stage will be reductions for cups and containers and cups for beverages and food containers. So we have to achieve reductions in these items, and it's going to affect everybody basically, between manufacturers, producers, retailers, importers, and all of the brand companies who are putting these items on the market. Frans Timmermans is the head of the Green New Deal in Europe, and he's the person really who is charging and forging ahead with the Single-Use Plastics Directive. He recently was written to by lobbyists from the packaging industry when COVID started, because they wanted to basically say, can we slow down the implementation of the Single-Use Plastics Directive, because, you know, single-use products are actually safer for people, considering we're going through a pandemic. And thankfully, he said he didn't really appreciate being written to by them, and he is not going to take any measures with regard to people lobbying in that instance, because he doesn't see any relationship at all. And he knows that the planet ultimately is in danger if we don't change the system. So 40% of all plastic made globally is for single-use packaging. And the way that we address that is not by necessarily moving from one product to another, because that's still single use. We need to move right up our waste hierarchy up to prevention. I'm very aware that a lot of you in this group are, you know, very advanced on your journey about what I'm talking about. So a lot of this isn't really new to you, but perhaps to some people it isn't. So I'm trying to keep it as general as possible. And when we actually move up the waste hierarchy towards waste prevention, and reuse is how we do that as well. We also look after lots of different things, like including the Sustainable Development Goals. And we have a responsibility really to the countries who suffer the most when we engage in overconsumption of single use. It's often the countries that have huge amounts of litter are blamed for that. And the truth is that those items come from the wealthier countries where the consumption is at its highest, and they make their way there to those countries who don't have the money or to create a good infrastructure. But what we want to do is look at opportunities, because there are opportunities, and especially with COVID, we can very much see that, you know, what we need is system change. And I've seen a lot of questions there coming up in relation to material, like what if we look at this material, and what if we go to another type of, you know, bioplastics. The important thing here is it's not really about the product, the material being sustainable. It's about working it with a sustainable system, because not one product is going to fit every solution. So we've got the likes of these veg boxes, which is absolutely fantastic. All around the country, everybody wants a veg box at the moment. And all of the local farmers are suffering because they can't actually get them out quick enough. There's a huge demand. And the benefits for this, if we go long-term and stick to how we, you know, changing how we purchase things, there's huge benefits, because we've little or no packaging. The boxes themselves are reused. We've less food waste, because when you get your box, you actually plan out your meals. You know what products you've got for the week, and you work to your menu to that. And when we source locally, one of the big things we do is we avoid all those flights coming in with food that we already produce in this country, and the carbon emissions that are associated with that. So, you know, some great companies out there like Green Earth Organics and Small Changes, and there are other companies who are emerging like Sprout and, you know, other farms around the country who are supplying veg boxes, but they're not really in tune maybe with the zero waste movement. So keep asking them, if you're getting a box, just get rid of the packaging as well. You don't need that packaging. And if you do need packaging, you can use a paper bag, which is returnable the following week as well. They're perfectly reusable. But right now, what we need to do is change the conversation when we're ordering takeaways as well. That's something that we can do. We've got a massive rise in takeaway orders happening. You only have to walk down the street and you can see, you know, sachets and cutlery as well. But as consumers, we can change that conversation, and it takes training, because behavior breeds behavior. And if we actually, when we're ordering, we specifically, you know, draw attention to the fact that we don't want any unnecessary throwaways. Why do we need cutlery? We have it at home. You know, pizza boxes coming with little plastic condiments, and you don't even use them or need them. So if we can actually say no, and we can actually encourage the businesses equally to ask, when they're taking an order, they should always ask, do we need these items as well, instead of just automatically supplying them. We've seen it with, you know, reusable cups, how we changed the conversation, and we've actually, Ireland has performed very, very well for bring your own, even just with a discount. With the latte levy coming in, you know, there will be significant consumer change. And we also have a Recircle pilot for containers in UCC Cork. So that's for your takeaway containers, which is absolutely wonderful. Tad is heading that up in UCC. It's just a matter of getting used to changing how we shop, and that just takes time.
So that's really time.
Okay, sorry, and I'll just fly through these, some simple solutions. So you've got reusable coffee there. You can see how suppliers like Cloud Picker are actually changing how they deliver their coffee into their cafes in returnable, reusable containers. Cree Restaurant there on the top, they simply worked with their local producers and made sure that all of their local produce arrived in returnable, reusable containers. On the bottom right, you've got Loop, and this is the future. It is the way people shop is going to change. And lastly, I just want to say a couple of resources down there on the bottom that you can look at. Go Zero, relative to Ireland, it's a directory and map of local stores selling plastic-free goods. How to Save Your Planet, One Object at a Time, a new book that's by Dr. Tara Shine for people who want to start their journey, and Living Lightly in Ireland, Sustainable Living blog by Elaine Butler, who does amazing research on everything that she puts up on that website and on her blogs. Well worth looking at. And just in case you think reusable cups are not going to come back, I have a little video to show you what's going on in other countries. And this comes from Takeaway Throwaways in New Zealand. And it'll actually prove that reusable is the safest option with contactless, because nobody touches the cup at all in this instance. Whereas if you buy a disposable takeaway coffee, hopefully this video will work. If you buy a disposable takeaway coffee, someone's touching it. Ooh. Okay. So it looks like my video doesn't really want to work at the moment. Hang on.
Perhaps there's a way we can get that to people later, Sorcha?
Yeah, I can do that later.
It is really interesting. I'd love to see that. Just to finish up from our panelists, not for the evening, of course, but last we have, but not least, Angela. So Angela, off you go now.
Yeah, so I'm going to go like Meaghan, and I'm going to go slide free. So first of all, I just kind of want to give people an overview of Sick of Plastic. It's kind of been touched on a couple of times throughout the evening, but it was formed in 2018, and it's like the child of Friends of the Earth and Voice. So it's facilitated by those two NGOs. And Sick of Plastic, as the name implies, is specifically looking at the plastic problem. So one thing that really struck me from the movie when I watched it was that the plastic issue for me, it's really a supply issue. It's coming from producers and suppliers, and it makes me think that we're walking, blindfolded down an alley into this massive problem, and a lot of us aren't really actually that conscious of it. We go shopping and everything's wrapped in plastic, and if you're not really tuned into this topic, you can quite easily just pick it all up and shop and not think any differently of it. So what Sick of Plastic is trying to do is to gather support all across the country. We've got groups set up all across the country, and what we're trying to do is facilitate local groups to come together and to work in their local area, particularly targeting their own supermarkets, because as a lot of people of other, and Sorcha has talked about trying to deal with the takeaway industry and the much wider issue. And if you want to change your shopping habits to go to local markets and farmers markets, while all those things are really good, for some people, they just want to go to the supermarket and do their shopping in the supermarket. So it's a massive issue that we need to address. We can't just assume that everybody's going to change their shopping habits really quickly. So what we're trying to do is put pressure on suppliers and producers for supermarkets. So we're doing that really, the way we've been doing it so far is in direct action. Our most successful campaign so far has been the shop and drop action, where we've got 69 groups set up all across the country, and they come together. They encourage people to turn up on a specific day. It's been happening nationwide for 2 days for the last 2 years. We were supposed to have one in April of this year, but unfortunately COVID has put an end to that for the moment. It will be back. But people do their shopping, and once they've paid and at the till, they unwrap their shopping from all the packaging and they simply leave it behind. They shop it and they drop it. They leave the packaging there. And it's really to send a message to the supermarkets that we don't want this. You're giving it to us as a supply issue, but there is no demand here for it. So we want to illustrate that the demand is not there. So we're really trying to change people's behavior on that local level. We also have policy focus on trying to bring in a deposit refund scheme and the tax that would be coming in on the coffee cups. So the campaign is a little bit more spread than just the shop and drop, but that is really one of our main aims. So we're really just asking people to get involved as much as possible. We're organized through Voice, so you can check out the Voice website and find the Sick of Plastic project there, and you'll get all the details there. We'd like people to connect with us as much as they can across social media. We're on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. We really want people to also, we're running a campaign called Loose for Less, where one of the other demands we have for supermarkets is if you go shopping, quite often the stuff that's packaged up, pre-packaged, is more expensive than the loose stuff, which seems totally counterintuitive. So if you see instances where this happens, we'd like people to take a picture of it, post it on whatever social medium you like, tag the supermarket and tag us, please, and use the hashtag Loose for Less to find all those details on our website. So I know everyone that tuned in tonight obviously has an interest in plastic. So we are really calling out for people to join with us because we need a really strong collective voice. Andy and the others who've spoken before us, and Meaghan, we know we're up against the oil and gas industry, and that is a massive group that we're trying to lobby against. So we need to make our voice as loud as possible. So we need as many people to join with us and help us to try and put together a strategy. Like, I think we need a strategy for mainstream supermarkets, for them to have plastic-free aisles, for them to change the way that shopping happens in the mainstream environment, because it's not necessarily going to be applicable to everybody to turn their shopping habits completely on their head. We need the mainstream supermarket providers to keep up with these demands as well. So we want people to get in touch, to join us and to help join our voices together. And they don't need to wait for the nationwide shop and drops. They can do that at any point. They can, obviously, perhaps now it's not going to be all that welcome with demands that are on in supermarkets, but as soon as life returns to some level of normality, we'll encourage everybody to get back to the attitude of telling supermarket suppliers, producers, that we don't want this plastic. So that's us.
Thanks, Angela. Great stuff. So there's lots of information there to everyone who's watching. It might feel a bit overwhelming at the moment. A lot of really amazing knowledge being shared. So if you have any questions, please do get in touch with anyone. You can ask in the questions and answers, or you can get in touch with us directly. So before we move on to some questions from the participants watching, we have another poll. If given the chance, you would buy the following items and bring your own containers or bags. So we're going to launch that poll. So it is, if you're given the chance, would you buy the following items and bring your own containers or bags? Considering the captive audience we have, I'm pretty sure we'd love everything without single use. But for the crack, we'll do a poll. To be specific, for science. Yes, the science of numbers. Oh, here we go. Share results.
Okay. So 91% of our people said that they would use other containers if they could bring their own. 7% said they would do fruit, veg, and dried goods. And 3% would just do fruit and veg. So people are willing to bring their containers. That's great. So keep in touch with us.
Awesome. Yeah, lots of people here on the panel who can help you expand on that if you're having problems shopping without having to buy a ton of single-use plastic. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing that and we'll go into some questions for our panel, if that's okay with everyone. My suggestion is people unmute for a while, and if you're not answering, you can mute again. Is that okay? Just so that we can be a little more ad hoc about this. So this is something I think about quite a lot. Wendy Cox has asked, what exactly is happening in Ireland to the plastic waste we put in our green recycling bins? Is any of it actually recycled here? Can anyone answer that question or have any information on that? Would anyone like to put their hand up? Niall?
Oh.
Niall, you put your hand up there? Or?
Yeah, well, my understanding, even though Ireland has very good credentials in relation to recovery of materials for recycling, we don't actually operate recycling facilities in this country. Essentially, there's one or two small outfits that can generate materials from recycled plastics, but really our capacity to handle the waste in this country is very limited.
Yeah.
And so, as the same as I suppose much of what we saw in the documentary, shipping out is our primary treatment process, I'm afraid. So we ship our problem to somebody else largely.
And so just like in the story of plastic, much of that goes to a whole host of different problems elsewhere.
Yeah, and we've had embarrassing scenarios, I suppose, in the past where containers of materials which weren't cleaned properly, were completely mixed waste, were being sent for recycling, and they were refused entry. So,
yeah,
you know, that's the reality of how we handle our waste. And we're also one of the largest producers of waste per capita in Europe. You know, even though our credentials are good in terms of collection, you have to balance out a lot of things when you look at the numbers, you know, or you have to accept responsibility on a lot of levels, I suppose.
Further to that question, actually, on the idea that we create the most waste per capita, let's say, than most countries. Does anyone here can expand on perhaps why we as Ireland are like that? What is it, a society as a whole, or Sorcha, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, one of the reasons is because we're an island, and that like dictates a lot of the food that is imported to us. There's a lot of superfluous packaging that we really don't need if we source locally. So the fact that like mainland Europe would tend to have lower rates is because, you know, they're not flying food necessarily, they are transporting it as long distances as we are. That's just one, but there are other reasons, yeah.
It's not a cultural thing. We don't believe that we have less regard than perhaps other.
I think as well, and we were talking about this the other day, that, you know, Ireland went through a very rapid growth with the Celtic Tiger as well, and we went from, you know, when you accelerate economic growth like that, you also, you know, develop like more disposable income as well. So our consumption went up as also. I remember in 2000, we were probably the country that caught up so quickly with the rest of Europe, but it was very, very fast paced.
So Anna Fitzgerald has a question. This might be a question for Meaghan or Andy, well, anyone actually, but it's what energy can Ireland use if we don't use LNG, given that adequate resources have not been provided to renewable energy supplies? Do we have any plans in place?
So LNG in particular is definitely not required. Even Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil said that in their response to the Green Party recently. So it's not required for security of energy supply. The Project Common Interest system is set up so that energy comes into Ireland and goes to the rest of Europe. But even looking at all of the gas facilities and energy use across Europe, the gas facilities that are there aren't being used to capacity at present. They're only being used to about 25% of capacity. So Ireland has huge wind resources and huge solar resources. Wind produced, don't know the exact figure, but my colleagues in Stop Climate Chaos would, if you go on that website.
Okay.
Wind produce a huge amount of our energy. Like on windy days, we produce a lot of energy, basically. But solar is something that we're not utilizing at all, really. In Germany, citizens are part of generating their own electricity. If you have solar panels on your roof or any building you own or schools or anything, this generates electricity that can be fed into the grid, and people can actually be paid for generating electricity. Ireland has blockages to that, left, right, and centre.
Why is that, Meaghan? Why is it, if I've asked this question before in groups like this, why do you believe we are not using these facilities, let's say, or the access to this sort of power? Why do you think we're not using it?
There's a lot of bureaucratic barriers to it. There's like a renewable energy feed-in tariff that just requires a lot of technical changes to the grid. It is possible, but the Commission for the Regulation of Energy is dragging its feet on it, and it's not allowing what's called an energy auction to happen very often. So it means that individual consumers don't get an opportunity to be part of it, because it's only there for huge producers of energy, companies that have a lot of capacity to build these huge companies that don't take the locals along with them. So there has been a lot of resistance to that sort of model in Ireland, because it was really poorly done with wind. A lot of land was given away to huge wind developers, and a lot of that energy was exported abroad. So people are rightly a bit worried about all of these huge companies taking up land and generating energy for their own profit that doesn't go back to the people. So it is understandable. It needs to be done in a democratic way, and Germany is a really, really great example. If you go over there, any of you that have been there, there's solar panels everywhere, and people are really part of that transition.
Awesome. There's a lot of questions coming in, just to reassure or inform our participants that we have lots of questions, and to read them all. Some of them are repeating themselves, so just to let me do a little quick sift through some of them. One of the other big questions that's come in is, what does a single-use free country, let's say, or society look like? And that's a huge question. It's more like it's blue skies thinking at this stage, because we have such a massive problem. But would anyone like to jump in and answer that broad question about what a single-use free society might look like, or what the practicalities of that would be?
I think it has to. Can I talk?
Thanks, Sorcha.
Yeah, just briefly, I think it's the whole system change, like we need from in terms of how we shop. So as consumers, if we keep saying that we want change, then it puts that pressure on the retailers to change the way they deliver products to us. And just to refer to Loop, which is Tom Saki is the CEO of Loop, and they are doing phenomenal work, because what they're doing is they're working with the big brands, and they are offering like a reuse system. They've trialed it, and it's a reuse system within the supermarket. So you're actually going to, be able to deliver to the people who don't shop like the rest, like a lot of us shop here, and when you go for the masses that way, you can actually really upscale change quite quickly. So he reported that they've had their busiest month in March, even with COVID. So it's really, really good news, because there's some fears around reuse with COVID at the moment, but that's not happening with them. And interesting, he made a point that it's actually the media who are really kind of pushing all this scaremongering around reuse with COVID.
Okay, thanks, Sorcha. That's good news. Angela?
I just think really a lot of it, what it might look like, we might just need to hold a mirror up and look back to where we used to be. Like a lot of people used to do a smaller shop locally, get what they needed for the next couple of days and move on. And things weren't coming to this massive supply chain. So it was shopping more locally, shopping more directly. So yeah, I mean, while it is blue skies thinking, we probably do have a blueprint.
Yeah, a really good one.
Yeah.
According to my mother and her very basic childhood, she'd say, there were a lot of glass bottles involved. That sounds quite dodgy, but you know what I mean. So one of the big things that comes into my mind, and it's a question that we had as a group, we were chatting yesterday, is can anyone offer any insight into the psychology of people, and maybe some of you guys are the participants watching, involved in the oil and gas industry? I mean, I'm talking about the people with real power. Is it purely just lucrative business to them, and they totally block out the catastrophe, basically, or the negative consequences of their actions? It's something that I certainly think about quite a lot. because obviously everyone here is certainly on one side, and it's a side for the better of the planet. Does anyone have any insight, or has they thought, probably they have wondered about the mindset of the money, the people behind oil and gas, the people behind this plastic industry, essentially?
I wouldn't pretend to be a psychologist, but I would just make the point that it's not a new phenomenon.
No, of course.
You mentioned there a while ago about being an island, and when plastic bottles first really started taking off in the 70s, New York as an island really spotted the problem because it had to ship the waste off. It saw it accumulating on the docks. And so it actually banned plastic bottles for a period, but that was overturned in the Supreme Court almost immediately in 1972. So this lobby and pressure that's been there really is a long term. Same thing happened in Hawaii, again, an island state. They tried to ban or put a levy on plastic materials, and that was stopped back in the 70s as well. So this is not a new phenomenon, if you like, or a new psychology. It's a business model, I suppose, that's been operating.
Yeah, I guess the main issue, I mean, obviously people are saying you're profit. Well, obviously there's a huge profit in oil. It's not a secret. But it's always been a curious thing to me, that's an understatement, to wonder how you, for example, you force oil on certain, well, the industry is such a dangerous one, and not even getting into the politics of it, about what kinds of people want to keep pushing oil and drilling for oil and drilling and fracking. I mean, that's a whole other webinar on the psychology of the kinds of human beings that are bringing this problem to us every day. Because, and one of the things, and maybe someone else can expand on this, is that, when you think of oil, a lot of the people watching might know this already. You think of just oil, you think of heating your home, you think of driving your car, but obviously we're here because it's at the core of the plastic problem. And I think Andy, you went to say something there, did you? And I just started talking. Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I've just highlighted some issues of this company named Ineos. The interesting thing about them is that they're owned by one man, in actual fact, and is one of the richest men in the UK. And they've turned from a pure petrochemical company into an upstream producer of oil and gas in order to have the full control of their own life chain of production. That's the reason why they wanted to become, the biggest wannabe fracker in the United Kingdom. And it was really, it was a huge force for mobilizing as soon as people realized that this fracking in the UK is not even in order to produce electricity or heating. But just to give you some numbers, why oil and gas is pushing, they have invested in the US alone in over 300 new projects worth $200 billion. So we're talking about petrochemical facilities that will go online within the next 30 to 50 years, that have an economic lifespan that go way beyond 2050 when we need to be at net zero. So the answer is, the oil and gas industry realizes that they need to die. So they're looking for markets where they can survive. And plastics is a huge market where they can survive. And they see growth opportunities because they have this global perspective. We're quite mature markets, but they see the world, they see Africa, they see Asia. So they see huge markets coming online within the next few decades. So that's why they're heavily investing in new petrochemical facilities that no one needs. They will produce more single-use plastics, but this gives them an escape out of their original business, and secures a perspective also for investors. So that's why I've said, maybe I didn't stress this enough, the plastic crisis is definitely a supply-driven crisis as it is a demand-driven crisis. And we need to make people aware of the fact that, yes, it's important to act as consumers, but we need to stop these new facilities going online because they will just keep flooding us with a lot of single-use plastics.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks, Andy. Does anyone else want to, there's another question that keeps coming up. one person talked about the sense of loss, and having watched the documentary, and the sense of feeling helpless. And for example, how do you all continue to do the work that you do? Where does your hope lie in order to keep pushing for better health, better use of sustainable products, and so forth? Does anyone, I'm sure you all have very strong feelings and you're up and down about it all the time, but does anyone here? Meaghan and Anna? So maybe Meaghan first, you could answer.
I'm going to be a bit cheesy. There's a quote that I like to tell people, because I get asked this question a lot. Okay, here we go.
We want it, we need it.
Action is the antidote to despair.
Yeah.
So I'm involved in lots of groups, and I mentioned Not Here Not Anywhere earlier, and there's also a group called the Dublin Eco Femmes, and it's really the community and the people together, and also my colleagues Frank Zirif and Andy on a European level, and it's like the prospects are bleak. Nobody is denying that, but it is a lot easier to kind of just try, even though the prospects are bleak when you're with a lot of other people. So if you're not involved in a group already, there's like so many around Ireland. And if you haven't heard of the One Future campaign, it's an initiative with lots of social justice and climate and faith-based organisations and health professionals all coming together to try and create a new vision for a different society based not on growth and not on profit, but on principles of justice and equity. And they'll be facilitating people to cultivate their own local groups. Some of them are already starting to form on the back of the last general election in Ireland. So it's really motivating to see people actually connecting, and some of the stuff that people say, like feeling so alone beforehand, and I feel like I can do something. So it's just, I think just finding the people, even if it seems weak. I think it's just, that's the main thing.
That's been my way of dealing with some of the panic. Anna, you were going to say something?
Well, I mean, Meaghan's absolutely right, and we're obviously, we're very lucky. I'm a professional campaigner. I spend my day on Zoom calls with amazing people from across Europe, talking about how we can act on this together. And I know I'm very lucky, and I know there'll be lots of people here watching this that think, well, I'm just here in my community, in my family, what can I do? And I would also want to say, any small steps you can take is absolutely fine. We know it's a massive problem. There are big movements that are working on this. And so even coming along to this, learning more about it, talking to your friends and family about it, looking out for more information, sharing it on social media, even if, you may have children, you may have a very, very stressful job, you might be doing something that is so important that you can only do small things, but please also those small steps are very, very important. And just showing up to something on an evening when we've got busy lives is also just amazing. So really getting inspiration from people, that is the main thing. I've been an environmental campaigner for over 20 years. My partner works on climate change. It's our entire life, but just being around people that can give you, you can draw on them when you're going through a bad time as well, and and they can give you that support. It is just fantastic. So do talk to people, share how you're feeling, share the information you're finding out. That's something that I think is really helpful.
Andy? Sorry. Thanks, Andy.
No, sorry, may I?
Yes, please.
Sure. I just wanted to say the one main thing that motivates me over and over again is, we're fighting these big companies, and when you start, with a campaign or when you see something and it seems so big, no matter if it's climate change, petrochemical industry, plastic industry. But the fact of the matter is, we're fighting them with just, a handful of people, and we're able to fight back. And this is something that people need to realize. It seems huge, but as soon as you start, punching back, they're not as hard as they seem. And in a lot of cases, they lack basic knowledge. I mean, they simply do a shitty job. And if you're willing to kind of like, really invest your time and educate yourself and really start doing something bit by bit, just as Anna said, you will soon start, and also reach out to other people, find other people like Meaghan has said, other groups. you'll soon start to realize that this change is possible. It's not just a dream, and we can be much faster and much more efficient than we might think if we're, alone in our own depression bubble, seeing this. So this is the thing that motivates me. From my own experiences, I saw that things that seemed impossible are possible. Point.
Thank you. Angela.
Sorry, I wasn't ready to unmute. So yeah, following on from pretty much what everyone else has said, but I guess from my own personal experience, I don't feel through the Sick of Plastic campaign that I'm necessarily taking on big industry directly. What I'm doing is I'm connecting with people in my locality, and we're sharing knowledge, and we're trying to work with our local supermarkets to make a change. So it's a lot less intimidating and a lot less smaller, but it also provides a sense of community that perhaps sometimes people talk about they're lacking in certain times. So that for me, it's a much more positive experience, and it doesn't have to be quite so scary, that you can start small with small issues and you build up from there, rather than trying to take on the world as an individual.
Is it possible, it's a big question, and it's for people who probably, is it possible to as a group of activists, let's say, if everyone who's watching tonight doesn't already consider themselves an activist, but now is one because they're here and they're talking about it, hopefully talking about it beyond tonight. Can we take on big oil and gas? And can we get somewhere? It's a big question, but is there a short answer to what the answer is to that? How do we defeat the supplier? Andy?
I don't want to occupy too much.
No, but if you can, it's that big question. We can talk for hours about, we want to give people a sense of well-being and that they're actually doing something good, like Angela's helping and Sorcha's campaign to empower people. And it is helping send a message to the higher powers or the powers that be. But is there a way of stopping the supply?
Yes, it is. I mean, it's a long way sometime, and you'll have to fight different fights. It's important to connect along the supply chain in this business because it's a global business. This is like one of my main tasks, is to make sure that the people are in touch in the US with the people in Europe that are fighting the same company and the supply chain. But again, I mean, look at the anti-LNG campaign in Shannon. When we started this 2.5 years ago, there was just a handful of people that talked about it, and now it's a massive movement, and it's absolutely feasible that you'll stop this, or even if you go further back, and you've implemented a fantastic fracking ban in Ireland that seemed impossible, and we've stopped, in actual fact, INEOS from really developing their new plants at Antwerp. And with regard to the UK, we've also stopped them from developing fracking in the UK for the time being. But this has cost them over 100 million pounds. I mean, these are losses that they have to admit now in their reports. So you see how you can actually read in numbers what our impact is.
Yeah, great. I mean, I'm always hopeful. And joining any of the groups that have been mentioned today is always a good way to get more information on how you can be part of the change, I guess, or push for change. So if you want to ask any questions of them directly, whether that might be, I hate to put this on everyone's plate, but to ask them about where they might be able to get more plastic-free options, where they might be able to join these groups.
Say to everybody.
They can join the groups that are behind all of the campaigns that Meaghan and Andy and Anna and Niall and Angela are working with and for. We're nearly at time. I wondered if anyone wanted to, on the panel, wanted to say something. It's such a huge topic, so to cover it in depth would be impossible after watching the documentary, so informative in itself. But does anyone here want to say anything that, I'm going to say something that has been missed, which is an understatement. But Niall, do you want to say something?
I just make a comment, I suppose, that there can be a sense of despair, as people have said, when you look at this issue and the scale of it, and you can feel quite small. But there was a time in this country where when you watched the 6 o'clock news, you were looking at fish deaths in every river almost around the country on a weekly basis because of dumping into rivers and things like that. And then legislation came in and our environment is completely different. It's not perfect yet, but it's completely different. So legislation is on the way as well. It's backing this, and other speakers have raised that point. So there's going to be a combination of solutions, I suppose, consumer-based, yeah, and I've mentioned that. It is very challenging to do so. If you look at current reports, PPE is probably going to be a major pollution issue now after this event, if you like. It's just the way, but those are the materials we have at hand today, but things are changing. I may have given the impression that bioplastics is not a viable alternative. It is, and there's things happening in the country in relation to that too. Glanbia, the dairy processor, got 22 million from the EU to produce lactic acid that will be made into biodegradable polylactic acid, truly biodegradable material that you can put into composting. Now that's industrial composting, but it's a material that will disappear over time. Okay. So there are advances at a technical level that are happening, as well as legislation coming in behind, and it's slow at the moment. The pressure needs to be kept on by people. Someone was asking what can consumers do. Keep pressure on, join the groups people have talked about, make your voice heard, try and make the choices you can, accepting that it's difficult to do so. But you do have an impact, even in the smallest possible ways. You do have an impact in the choices that you make as well. So there are positive things happening also.
Yeah. Anna?
I know there's been a couple of questions asking about PPE and COVID, which I think is absolutely,
quite a lot of questions about PPE.
It's top of people's mind. And I just wanted to share with you something that's really positive. So one of the members of the Break Free from Plastic movement in Portugal, they're involved in a project working with the health service, the ministry in Portugal, and also universities to develop reusable PPE, looking at what textiles can be used, how it could be basically disinfected in-house within the hospitals. And again, not only is that environmentally better, and obviously we're concerned about that, but also it means that it's more resilient for the health service for that to happen, because you're in control of it. You're not waiting for those supply chains. And I don't know how it's been in Ireland, but obviously the supply chain has been a massive problem within the UK. And our health workers and frontline workers are not having good access to PPE. So the Break Free from Plastic movement is full of organisations that are actually also demonstrating what the solutions are to some of these huge problems. Not only that we're struggling and we're joining in each other's struggles across the globe, we're also coming forward with ways that these problems can be addressed. So I just wanted to end on that, on that sort of element of hope there. It's not to say it's going to solve it all, but I think I just wanted to share that with people because I know there've been a lot of questions about that.
Yeah, because single use has been a real on people's minds consistently when we watch the TV, and it's the PPE topic is huge, and therefore you wonder how much more plastic we're going to have to deal with afterwards. Sorcha, what did you want to say?
Very quickly, I listened to a very good podcast the other day, and it was by a nurse actually who works in hospitals, greening hospitals in New York. And she was a nurse in the 80s, and pretty much everything was reusable back then. It's just we took this huge shift to disposables. It's all about having proper sanitization systems in place, and that applies to every product we use. If we create that system, we will be able to avoid single use. Another quick thing is just to say, Single-Use Plastic Directive also includes compostable packaging, bio-based packaging. Those items will be affected and they will be banned in July next year too. So it's important that we move to reuse systems as opposed to from one single use to another. And I know there's loads of questions there, and someone asked a question from a Tidy Towns, what they could do because of the cup situation maybe at the moment. I try and engage with all the takeaways, but go very gently, because all the businesses, it's really sensitive and hard for them trying to get back on track, and it's a lot of stress for them to try and deal with how to stay in business, how to look after their employees, how to trade safely. So if you can maybe approach in a nice gentle way, about the conversation about the disposables that we don't really need, just the ones we don't really need. Always go for the hanging fruit first. It's much easier. And when you win those battles, then it makes it easier to go on to the bigger ones,
Yeah, it's a tough one because, as we keep saying, at the moment, there's a huge amount of single use in the system. More than ever, because we're taking meals from restaurants that would ordinarily serve it to us on crockery, etc., etc. So there's a huge surge of that. I guess we have to prioritize our health. Or well, Anna would argue that's not healthy, and it's true. But anyway, it's been incredible, the response from people watching, and it's consistently growing here. And it's a really rousing thing, because I know myself, watching the documentary again this week, it is quite a difficult topic to not worry about all the time. And you see it everywhere you go. I'm in the countryside now, and I still see plastic in everything I'm using or have been given. So I wanted to say thank you to Angela and everybody in Voice Ireland and Friends of the Earth, to Sorcha, Anna, Niall, Meaghan and Andy, and everyone behind the scenes who are trying to send me all the information as we go. I don't know if anyone out there has tried to host a Zoom panel. It's really stressful. But it's so worth it. So thank you to everybody who partook today, and all of you who are watching. It's really what's the word I'm looking for? It's making me really happy is what I wanted to say. I'm lost for words. There's so many words on my screen. What I wanted to say as well is that please do get in touch with Voice or Friends of the Earth as two groups that will be able to send you to the group that is more suitable to what you need, whether that be Not Here, Not Anywhere, Stop Climate Chaos, etc. So if you do have a particular, if you want to, get behind Meaghan on what she's doing, or Andy, or find out more about what Anna and Niall are working on. And obviously Sorcha is going to gently speak to the hanging fruit in all the different places. And Angela, do you want to add anything as someone I've been conversing with a lot this week?
Yeah, no, firstly, thank you very much. And thanks to all the panelists. It's been a very informative evening. Lots of information for people to take on. Thank you to all of our participants. I think we were up to about 150 there at one stage, so that's great. And just everyone keep up doing what you can do, like target whatever is easy for you and start there, small steps.
Yeah. You're here for a reason, and obviously you want more information, or you want to help or get some answers. And everyone here has touched on something, and I'm sure that everyone who's watching is interested in. So
should really do it again,
and thank you to Break Free for Plastic for supplying us with the movie.
Yes, thank you.
The license for 2 nights.
Thank you so much. Again, in the future, I imagine there will be the
non-COVID
universe where we all get to stand in the same room in close quarters. We'll hopefully there'll be more screenings.
Yes, our plan is to screen again in real time whenever we can.
And good night. Take care. Thanks, everyone.